And you said that also, like you said, in the social selling has been around for a very long time, particularly in the US and in the West. But sometimes in other parts of the world and in other countries, there's almost a lag time. You said in adoption of those the latest practices and so on. So what are some of the things that when you came here that you found, or maybe are still are that are now you've been running the business for a year? Are most companies still lacking in that adoption, or is everyone slowly now beginning to realize the importance of implementing these kind of strategies?
So there is not really a lot of data around that.
Okay.
Because LinkedIn releases reports every year, state of sales reports. There are some reports going out in the US and in the West, in Europe, and so on. There is nothing really allowing us to compare the adoption of social selling, for example, in UAE or in the Middle East with regards to others.
Okay.
LinkedIn has got an index called Social Selling Index,
Yep.
called SSI.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure they have information when it comes to the average SSI of salespeople in UAE or by country, and they can compare between countries.
Yeah.
I think also, some global companies like Oracle, SAP, Microsoft, LinkedIn, and so on, they've been adopting social selling for years now. And those programs have been run globally. So the offices in Dubai or in the Middle East of Oracle, they've been adopting executing those strategies when it comes to digital sales and social selling for years. So there is, and salespeople and employees are moving across companies. So it ends up actually leveling up the countries and
yeah.
But yes, of course, there is a small gap, I would say.
Sure.
It's taking off, and I hope I will contribute as well.
No, I'm sure you will. I think, like you said, there is a gap here, and I think there's a big need for a lot of companies to start implementing that kind of stuff here. At least from the conversations that I have with my friends who work at various companies, that is one thing that does come up, and you're like, okay, it's interesting that that's not like top of mind for them.
Yeah.
And one thing that was interesting that you told me is that now there's I can't remember what the numbers were, but the number of decision makers involved in any process have gone up from like 5.4 to 6.8. So is that why social selling right now is so crucial? Because it kind of helps you bypass those early decision makers faster, or how does that play into that kind of?
So Forrester has released this report a couple of years ago, and the forecast was to have around 10 decision. So in the B2B decision-making process, when it comes to purchasing, they were in their report. They were showing that the purchasing process was actually including more decision makers.
Yeah.
And they were basically forecasting around 10 by 2020. So, and it's true that companies have a lot more functions involved in decisions and purchasing decisions. So from a B2B standpoint and B2B sales, in the B2B sales industry, salespeople need to bring more, or at least be aware, identify more potential decision makers who might be involved in the decision making process.
Yeah.
So actually, identifying them earlier on will allow you to build those relationships earlier on.
Yeah, exactly.
And will actually be able to prevent, or at least initiate those conversations before you find out by surprise that there are people at the table that you didn't even know about.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you can educate them early on, you can influence them early on, you can be there and support them early on, and that will actually obviously help get the deal, get the deal progress faster.
Yeah.
And usually it also brings the value of the deal up.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that you were talking about, because I know you guys do social selling, digital marketing, and social recruiting. So you've been going now for about a year. which of those three areas have you seen is, I guess, the most challenging areas, or the areas that people haven't really adopted so much, and which areas do you see have the biggest potential for like growth and like revenue?
So I used to be a LinkedIn Talent Solutions. So we used to help organizations with regards to recruitment and employer branding.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, LinkedIn, the value for companies adopting LinkedIn Talent Solutions is much greater than other solutions that LinkedIn offers. So the adoption of the LinkedIn as a tool for recruitment is huge. And that's the reason why it's also a business line that's generating most revenue for LinkedIn as a business.
Really?
Globally.
Okay, interesting.
So the LinkedIn corporate solutions, when it comes to recruitment, is the biggest revenue stream when it comes to LinkedIn. The second one is related to marketing, products, advertising, and so on. And you also have the new kid on the block, the sales solution, which is around helping organizations with regards to sales.
Yeah.
So with Sales Navigator and all of that. So in terms of the adoption in the region, if we're talking about the Middle East, there is a much greater penetration when it comes to LinkedIn Talent Solutions.
Okay.
And obviously it depends what you mean by potential, because obviously that means there are more customers that are using LinkedIn and that could be benefiting of optimizing and maximizing the ROI of their investment with LinkedIn when it comes to recruitment and so on. Obviously right now companies don't recruit that much. Hopefully it's going to pick up now. When it comes to sales, the same. It's even more critical for organizations to sell and to generate revenue.
Yeah.
However, a lot of organizations are not yet mature to the point where they have a defined strategy when it comes to social selling and so on. They might, occasionally leverage LinkedIn as part of other sources for generating leads. Their marketing might be focused on social media marketing as well, and sales might be using LinkedIn randomly as random act of social selling, but there is not really a structured strategy for the organization.
Yeah.
So that's what, in terms of potential, depends, because if you look at the market, yes, there is a greater potential for social recruitment, but the maturity is there already, and the gap for maximizing the ROI is much smaller than, for example, for the social selling, which the potential is huge, because every company in the region is pretty much focused on generating revenue out of the Middle East, and so and the adoption of social selling as a methodology is much smaller.
Much smaller, yeah.
So there is greater potential on that as well.
Okay, so the fact that and that makes perfect sense as to why you focused on like social selling for like your business as like one of the key areas. If the potential for that is much greater. So let's say I know it's probably very industry specific and business specific, but let's say I'm a client. I come to you, I'm like, Guillaume, I would like to build out my social selling strategy. What are the components, or what advice would you give to companies or like people who are looking to have a nice, strong social selling strategy?
So the first thing is understanding where they are coming from.
And what do you mean by that?
You cannot really help them get where they want to be if you don't understand where they are today and where they're coming from and why they get there.
Okay.
They got there. So we do assessments. We understand through surveys and assessments and discovery interviews. We discuss with leaders. Usually we bring to the table marketing, the marketing function, the sales function. Sometimes they have learning and development or sales enablement or sales ops. You also want to bring to the table the executive team, for example, or CEO or managing partner, depending on the size of the organization.
Yeah.
And understanding where they are all coming from, the business objectives, and the situation today in terms of doing a small assessment of the team.
Okay.
Because again, assessing the team will allow the sales leaders sometimes to discover the maturity of their team when it comes to using social social media or digital tools or social selling in general.
And when you say maturity, are you talking about how comfortable the team is using those type of tools, or their awareness or understanding of how to implement, that kind of stuff?
So maturity when it comes to the usage, the current usage.
Okay.
Because the usage will give you a big indicator whether they get it, how much they get it, what kind of functionality they use, and which functionality they don't use yet, and that will give you a good understanding of where they are.
Where they are, yeah.
And so giving this knowledge and this assessment in terms of visibility to the leadership team, the sales team, the marketing team, and so on, and aligning with regards to where they're coming from, their current situation, and what they want to be, their goals or their revenue goals or their business goals, and are trying to actually build a program to get them there.
Okay. So it starts first of all from the story, understanding where they were, how did we get here, and where do you want to go. And I guess one of the key things that you talked about, like you said, is the maturity or the use of their teams or their companies in the social space, and you build and you help consult with them in building out a strategy on how to improve that to get to where they're trying to go. Okay.
And if I may, actually, I designed a small assessment, and my goal is to actually have a small assessment that is publicly available. So actually, every year we get enough data to do an annual report.
Okay.
So we can do some kind of annual report based on this is the maturity of sales teams by industry, this is the maturity by function or seniority. So like salespeople who are, in individual contributor roles, this is the maturity. Sales leaders, this is the maturity when it comes to social selling. So then we can actually do a report by country or by, for example, within UAE, by function or by industry. So then it's really good for companies to be able to see my company, how do I compare with other companies in my space.
Yeah.
And so, this assessment that we are doing, we are doing a detailed one for companies, like a custom one, but I'm about to actually, have an assessment that is publicly available. So then this data will be, used for doing an annual report.
Okay, and I think
that's one of the goals.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because, like you said, getting insights into, first of all, the overall scene, in the industry here, and like you said, looking at as your company being like, okay, how are they using it, and how successful are they? Is it because of their social strategy? It just gives you so much more insights into that world and the potential and the progress of that world, and maybe where you should be focusing your attention. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And it serves two purposes. One is about individuals.
Yeah.
Because as a sales leader, as a sales professional, I can compare myself. I can actually do the assessment and very quickly get a score, and I can actually see where do I compare versus other sales individuals in my space.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the same for sales leaders. So then very quickly you get a feedback, and then all this information can actually be also used for an annual report. So then, you can actually get some insights in the region as well.
Yeah. So you're giving them very detailed and specific business insights.
At company level as well. So then you have individual level, and then you can actually have a company level kind of annual report as well.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that's a very good idea. And I think a lot of people will be very interested in finding out, where they stand in whatever industry they're in.